Civil society organizations are calling for the suspension of the Agyapa Minerals royalty agreement until all necessary documents have been disclosed. They are calling for a multi-stakeholder conference to relook the deal. Campaign coordinator for ISODEC, Steve Mantiao, addressed a press conference in Accra.
The opaque manner in which the Act is being implemented, the relatively weak transparency and public oversight arrangements, and the haste with which the government is running to the market, in spite of concerns being raised by a broad spectrum of the Ghanaian populace, do not engender public trust and consensus building around matters of public policy as important as this one. This approach rather raises moral and governance questions. The assumption that once everything goes through Parliament, it is above board and represents the interests of all Ghanaians is deceptive and turns democracy on its head. It makes the elected the only relevant stakeholders in policymaking. And as former US President Barack Obama once noted, it wrongly assumes that democracy is a transaction to be executed between leaders and the people only at elections. Ladies and gentlemen, Ghanaians will probably not have lost sleep over this Agyapa mineral income investment transaction if it had been orchestrated under an open and transparent regime such as the Petroleum Revenue Management Act provides. Indeed, what the government is intending to do with our mineral royalties would not have been permissible under the Petroleum Revenue Management Act. For instance, Section 5 of the Act prohibits the use of Petroleum Holding Fund, which includes royalties, as collateral for borrowing. And this is what exactly we are trying to do with our mineral royalty. It also prohibits borrowing against the country's petroleum reserves, which sadly is what the Minerals Income Investment Fund seeks to do. Ladies and gentlemen, we are happy to engage, as always, to learn, debate, and challenge government on ways to optimize the mineral royalties if government is willing to activate those democratic channels. Those who have divergent views are equal stakeholders in the mineral revenue. Therefore, attempts to disregard dissenting views is most unfortunate, as they defy the principle of participatory decision-making, which forms the bedrock of democratic practice. We take this opportunity to call on His Excellency Nana Addo Dankwa Akufo-Addo to, 1, acknowledge that though the Minerals Income Investment Fund and its special purpose vehicle may be legal without public input, it fundamentally goes against his pact with the Ghanaian people, particularly the mining communities, to cede 20% of mineral royalties to develop the communities.
All right, Joseph Opoku-Gapo covered that press conference for us. He joins me in the studio with more on this concerns being raised by the civil society organizations. Tell us which organizations were at the press conference, Joseph.
So that's Dr. Steve Mantiao of ISODEC. Right behind him, as you saw, was Ben Boachi of the African Center for Energy Policy. And then Imani Ghana, as well as the Center for Democratic Development and a number of others. There are actually 15 of them. The Civil Society Platform on Oil and Gas, as well as the Center for Extractives and Development Africa, are part of this.
Great. So what are the specific concerns raised by the civil society organizations? They
think, for example, Parliament didn't do a good job in terms of adequate oversight in allowing for this particular transaction to go through and giving it the necessary approval. They think that it will not be in the interest of the country if the nation's gold royalties are monetized for a lump sum currently going into the future. And they actually had very specific demands of the President, Nana Addo Dankwa Akufo-Addo. For example, they're saying that they would want to see a suspension of the implementation of the Mineral Income Investment Fund legislation until all documents relating to the establishment of this special purpose vehicle, that's Agyapa Mineral Royalties, and its beneficiary owners are disclosed. And they also want to see a situation where there should be a multi-stakeholder review in order to ensure that these investments actually benefit the necessary communities. And they're asking that government effort in terms of how they've established this firm in a tax haven, they think it sends very bad signals to the ordinary members of the public, and so government should be careful. They think that the whole agreement, and they use some very interesting words, they think it's an elite capture of the state's resources, and Ghanaian people have been shortchanged, which is why they want brakes put on that particular agreement.
Okay, and so they are also casting doubt about the capital that is required to be raised for this deal.
You know, in summary, the idea behind this is that the nation's gold royalties for some years to come, the estimation about 15 years, a lump sum will be raised on the international market, the London Stock Exchange, the Ghana Stock Exchange, about $1 billion US, 500 million of that will go to government in order for government to use for necessary development initiatives. Right. They're making the point that there's been a lot of bad mouthing of this particular agreement right from Parliament. You recall John Jinapo, a minority MP on the Finance Committee, cautioning investors against investing in this, and we're hearing from the CSOs themselves raising concerns about it. They think that there's been a lot of bad mouthing of this whole structure, and they think that if government goes ahead to do the necessary listing of Agyapa on the stock exchange to sell out 49% of it, chances are that enough resources would not come in and that they will not be able to raise the expected capital, which is why they think a whole reconstruction of the
And the question, though, as to whether they are going to get a listening ear from the government, which seems as though it has made up its mind about it.
It's a question that I put to them, that Parliament passed the law in 2018 to allow for this. That law was amendment about 2 months ago in order to allow for this. The agreement itself has actually been approved, although it was done by just one side of the House. How sure are they that the President will pay attention? And they say this is actually part of a series of activities that they would roll out in order to put pressure on government, in order to put brakes on it. And for Dr. Stimantiao, if government doesn't listen, they would also support the call by former President Mahama and his caution that he will not respect this agreement if power changes hands eventually.
Right. Thanks for bringing us up to date. Joseph Opoku Gakpo, we are grateful.